order the board meeting of Greater Richmond Transit Company for February 2021. And all of the board members are present. So let's just go over the board members. I'm Ben Campbell, I'm chair. Is there a vice chair here?
Gary Armstrong, vice chair.
All right. How about you, Ian?
Ian Milliken, board of directors.
From City of Richmond, correct? And Chesterfield, sorry. Just trying to co-opt you, Ian. Dr. Coles.
Good morning, everyone. Eldridge Coles, board member of Richmond.
All right. And George?
George Braxton, board member for Richmond.
Danny?
Andy Smith, Chesterfield board member for Chesterfield.
All right, thank you. We're all present then. And I'd like to hand this over to Ms. Rose Pace for public comments.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. We did receive public comment. For the benefit of all attendees today, I will briefly explain how to participate in public comment at board meetings. To protect the safety of meeting attendees, this meeting is being conducted through electronic communication means pursuant to and in compliance with City of Richmond Ordinance number 2020-093 adopted April 9th, 2020. Video and audio of board meetings are streamed live online and recorded for later viewing at GRTC's YouTube channel. Board meeting notices, agendas, and packets are available at GRTC's website, ridegrtc.com. Citizens are welcome to provide their comments in writing in advance to carrie.rosepace@ridegrtc.com. The person responsible for receiving comments in writing is Carrie Rose Pace, Director of Communications. All written communications received via email prior to 5 p.m. on the day preceding a meeting will be provided to all members of the board the night before the meeting and will be included in the minutes of the meeting. During the public comments portion of the agenda, Carrie Rose Pace will read all comments received by the submission deadline following the 2-minute speaking time limit normally observed in board meetings. This meeting, I received 1 submitted comment in writing to be read. From Ms. Liz Williamson at 1507 Grove Avenue. I want to continue to reiterate my strong opposition of the extended Route 77 on Grove from Robinson to Harrison, including the addition of new bus stops on both sides of Lombardy and Meadow. I continue to see that the sizable negative impacts are not justified by the need for the route. These negative impacts have been affecting me on a daily basis since the route began last fall, including diminished pedestrian safety, reduced parking, and increased noise and pollution. Please change this route. I appreciate that GRTC has a process for reevaluating routes methodically. I also thank GRTC for recognizing the low ridership on this route and slightly decreasing the frequency from 30 minutes to 40 minutes. However, I wish to remind GRTC that this route affects me and my family every day, whether it is an issue of making sure that my young child is safe when crossing the streets to get to our on-street parking, or it is our recent lack of parking due to the loss of at least 4 spaces on our block. Or it is the stress of continuing to see buses not abiding by the speed limit, or it is listening to the drone of buses during my virtual workday. I have several follow-up points to make. 1, ridership numbers continue to fail to justify the route. January ridership numbers remain low. Residents continue to see empty buses. Further, we've lost parking. The on-off counts for the new Lombardy and Meadow stops average no more than 2 people per day at most at Meadow eastbound, and typically less. This certainly does not justify the hardships that residents are facing with decreased parking due to these stops. And then enclosed is a table of the January ridership data, which I believe will be presented later in the board meeting.
All right, thank you.
2. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, we've got one more paragraph.
Huh? All right, yeah.
Yes, sir. Just one more paragraph. 2, the lower fan is unique and should be treated differently than other parts of the route on Grove. Our area of Grove has a higher density and student population than the museum district and even the upper fan. We have heightened safety concerns and parking issues. Recently, I have observed increased parking challenges in the daytime intermittently and most nights, which were not commonplace in November and December. Our block is beginning to suffer from the spaces we have lost due to the new, infrequently used bus stop at Lombardy. I cannot imagine how differently things will be when all of the VCU come back to in-person learning. Once parking is stretched, our street will see increased double parking. Double parking will lead to buses and other vehicles passing in the wrong lane to get around the temporarily blocked lane. This is a serious accident waiting to happen. Please consider this as you continue to evaluate routes. Further, my neighbors and I reiterate that our part of the fan, Main Street, is only 2 blocks away. It is a more appropriate and safe thoroughfare for buses and larger vehicles. Thank you for your consideration. Very truly yours, Liz Williamson. Mr. Chair, this concludes the public comments.
Thank you, Ms. Rose Pace. Julie, there are regular allegations that our buses are speeding through the fan. Is that correct?
It is correct that there are regular allegations from a select member, a group of people on the fan. That is correct. However, we have had reviews of our videos, reviews of our tapes, our security. Tony can certainly talk about the review we've done on that section, and we have not found that those allegations have been substantiated by any evidence that we have of either on-street observations or the video observations along that area.
Thank you. All right. You want to say anything on that, Tony?
Yeah, just to Julie's point, we have done video observation as well as had supervisors out there as well to monitor it, and we found nothing that would indicate that there's an abundant amount of speeding by the operators. But we will, of course, continue to remind the operators to take their time and be as safe as possible going through that area.
Thank you very much. Of course, anytime an allegation like that is made, we have to check it, but I am under the impression that we're pretty serious about that. Let's go ahead. Adrian Torres is going to give us an update on the work she and others have been doing for the CVTA. Good morning.
Yes, good morning. First, I do have a PowerPoint, but first I'll kind of intro what's happening, what's been happening in the kind of the rest of CVTA.
Oh, wait, we have to approve the minutes. I'm sorry. Could I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Any corrections or additions? All in favor for approving the minutes of the last meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? It's done. Now, Ms. Torres.
All right, good morning.
Good morning.
The CVTA full authority, they met on January 29th was their last meeting. And one of the big outcomes of that is they approved AECOM as the consultant to do the governance report. So that has been approved. The CVTA TAC, they met on February 8th, covered many topics. The Regional Public Transportation Plan was discussed as an update, and I have a presentation I'll get into right after I go through these updates. A quick discussion just as far as the update that AECOM was selected for the transit governance reports was discussed. There was a lengthy discussion on the regional project prioritization, and what that addresses is the spending of the 35% for the regional funds. What ended up happening out of the discussion was a subcommittee has actually been established to discuss the scoring criteria. In the meeting, they recommended using the long-range transportation plan criteria. However, there's going to be a deeper dive to look at that as an option, but as many other options as well. And then the certification for reporting, they sent a spreadsheet to all the jurisdictions to start listing out the confirmation of their member spending plans for FY22. So quite a bit covered there. The Finance Committee met on January 10th last week. They covered the policies and procedures, MOU for fiscal services, roles and responsibility of supporting partners, spending plans, and then the FY22 admin and operating budget. The next meeting dates for all the committees, Finance is March 10th, TAC is March 8th, and then CVTA is at the end of the month, February 26th. All right, I'm going to share my screen to share PowerPoint. All right, well, we met with you guys last. Got her from Jarrett Walker, did a presentation. kind of how we were approaching the enhancements for FY22 and beyond. So we had a core design, and that happened on January 19th through 22nd. And it was a mixture of jurisdictions as well as many transit-related agencies. So in here is the full list. We had GRTC, RRPDC, City of Richmond, Henrico County, RideFinders, Chesterfield County, Hanover County, GRPT, VTA, and we even had a brief appearance by Ashland when we were discussing the Route 1. So kind of the task at hand here was to discuss expansion concepts based on priorities for FY22. So what that meant was we were going to develop two kind of extreme concepts using 17 additional buses, or another way to say that is $10 million expansion that we could hopefully do in FY22 or maybe phase in depending on GRTC's resources over the next year. So I'm going to show this, and I know it's really little, so I apologize, but I'm going to go ahead and kind of highlight what the differences are. So in the ridership concept, which means spending that $10 million for 17 buses in those more denser areas, more frequent routes, increasing some of the frequencies. This is kind of what it looks like. So you see a lot more red compared to what our system has today. And I'm just going to highlight a few of them. I'm not going to go over all of them. But for example, here, the Route 5 currently has 15-minute frequency. And in this concept, it would actually increase the Route 5 to 10-minute frequency. But in addition to that, it has an extension that goes out to U of R. And what that is actually absorbing the 77 into the Route 5. And the benefit of this is it still maintains that VCU campus connector, but it also makes kind of a U of R West End and U of R downtown campus connector as well. A connection to the business district for those in the Grove area, as well as increases the frequency for those in the East End and the downtown area. So that was a big one there. And all the little bullet points also say what's happening. The Route 19 increased frequency from 30 minutes today to 20 minutes. The Route 18 and 79 got extended a little bit further. The Route 29, which is an express route, now provides service to the Innsbrook area as far as a little circulator for them. There is increased service, 15 minutes, on Route 1 all the way down to Broad Rock area. So that gets a little more south side service frequency down here. And then a big one here is the extension to Chesterfield Town Center. On the East End, there is addition of frequency on the Route 7. So it now has 15-minute frequency in addition to the 30-minute today. And then up here on Route 1 is an extension all the way up to Brook and Parham, and that is the frequent service of every 15 minutes up there. I'm sorry, the 30 minutes up to Brook and Parham. And then you have a 3A extension to Azalea and Chamberlain. So quite a bit happening around the whole system, south, east, north, and west. So that's the ridership concept.
So is that 70-30 ridership, or is that 100% ridership?
That was looking at it a little bit more like 100% ridership. I wouldn't give those exact numbers, but a lot more of the 17 buses going to things that they assumed were in dense areas for the most part that would bring ridership.
Thank you.
Adrian, I just want to make sure the one thing I can see on here is this airplane. So that's the airport over there, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
The airport.
Right.
Sorry, let me move my.
So this is not.
Yes, this is the airport. So this is the Route 7 on 9 Mile Road right here.
Right.
That's increased frequency. The rest of the route, which goes to the airport today, that remains the same, the 7A and 7B. So it still remains 30-minute frequency as we have today.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, and so the other extreme was a coverage concept. So not as much red, a lot more blue and green. Still, all of these expansion routes are considered regional, whether it's ridership or it's coverage. They're still regional in nature in terms of definition to be able to spend the dollars of CVTA. So what's happening here on Route 1, Brook and Parham, instead of going just there, it actually is extended all the way up to Virginia Center Commons. So a longer route. And then we don't have the Route 19 going to 20-minute frequency, but it is extended a little bit further out to Goochland to the VCU Sheltering Arms facility out there. I think it's about a mile down the road. So a little bit more coverage on that area. We still have the same thing from the ridership concept where you have the 1A extended to Chesterfield Town Center. That was a theme that was held for both systems. Let's see, we have a Route 84, which is Wilkinson service down in the Chesterfield County area, as well as a 1C extended to Commonwealth Center with 60-minute service. So a lot more coverage routes in this in the Chesterfield area in this scenario. And there's not really much change in the Route 7 area in this scenario, but there is an extension of Route 3A. Same thing for Azalea and Chamberlain, and then an extension of Route C going to Memorial Regional Hospital in Hanover County.
Is the
So they're very, very, go ahead.
what road is the Wilkinson Terrace on? What is that? What street is that running on? 84.
Can
Is that
someone
Hull Street?
Still help me a little bit.
Is
I'm
that
not
Hull
actually that
Street?
familiar with that. I think it
What's
goes
the-
down Hull
can
Street
you see
Road.
the
Sorry, the
number?
map is small for me as well.
I think that's
Yeah,
Hull
that's-
Street.
That looks like the street I use. That looks like Whole Street to me.
Okay. And how far
Um,
out? And Wilkinson? Oh, Route 1C goes to Commonwealth Center. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. What's the general rationale of this other than just taking advertisement deep into the counties? I mean, that's on the butt. I mean, it's early and I'm trying to grab a sense of what's the rationale for going out this far? Are there people there? Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and highlight it. This is a concept and not a proposal. So the idea was just to build extremes and then to come together and say, I mean, you could spend your money, and just like you pointed out, George, you're not going to get a lot of ridership. You're going to may hit some activity centers out there. You may hit some pockets of people, but you're really not going to get frequent service that will necessarily benefit a lot of people, because you may get a lot of 60-minute buses that we know if you miss it, not really the most reliable, but you do end up with the footprint of service for certain activity centers, as well as I said, different pockets of people. It was just another extreme so people could see
Sure.
if you did spend that same amount of money, those same amount of buses, you could get this coverage. These are in Chesterfield, for example, those are areas where they could see a need in the future. Went ahead and grabbed them as far as coverage at this point in time.
But this is
And we
like a concept car. It's like you'll never see it on
Exactly.
the street, but you can pick and choose some things from it to work into it.
So Jarrett Walker uses this basic analysis of ridership as a criterion or coverage as a criterion, and then asks us or asks planners to determine what percentage of their work they want to do to increase in ridership and work on major routes, and what percentage they want to do on coverage, which is this service. And I will say that it does represent lifeline service. That is, we have no lifeline service to these various places, which would be an employee who gets stuck or needs to get there, or stuff where you just don't end up being stuck at a certain place. And that's true in many cities all over the world. It isn't true in Richmond. It is true in the city of Richmond. It's not true in the counties.
Mr. Chairman, and
Yes.
if I might add, just as a reminder that I got a little caught up in the conversation between the extreme of the ridership versus coverage, and talking to consultants and talking to Adrian, had to remind myself that really this is talking about the use of the regional funds for that core ridership, for the increasing it. That when we start looking at routes that don't have a lot of regional significance and connectivity to jobs and housing, that there's still the opportunity for each of our local partners to increase coverage with their own dollars that they're getting both internally and from the CBTA for transit. So choosing a ridership model or a coverage model doesn't necessarily mean we can't get both. It's just questioning where do we place the value of the regional dollars? Do we place them more in the ridership or the coverage?
Thank
And
you.
then where do we place the value of the local dollars? Do we place them in the ridership or the coverage as we're looking to allocate these funding sources?
All right, and just to give some perspective on what these mean in terms of access for jobs. Plenty other ways that we could look at it: minorities, low income, jobs. We felt like it's a good representation just to see the difference from the current system. So what this shows in 45 minutes, what is the increase in amount of jobs from the different concepts. So the ridership concept, if you can't see it, the kind of the darker the blue, the more jobs it's serving. So you'll see in the ridership concept, there's significant amount more, of course, in the West End in Henrico County, which we know there are a lot of jobs out there. Same with 9 Mile Road, approaching kind of the White Oak Village area and the Walmart facilities out there. A lot more service on the route on the 9 Mile Road provides more access to jobs. You see a lot more in North Side with this Route 3, as well as the one extension up here in Chesterfield County. This is the extension out to the town center, which is pretty heavy in jobs, that whole corridor. And then with the frequency in the South Side, you do see more blue down here as far as access to jobs, and most likely it's for people to be able to go downtown. And so there are some increases in the coverage concept as well. It's just not as extreme with the ridership concept. Any questions about those two differences?
Help me understand how it is we get more jobs served by the ridership concept than we do by the coverage concept. Are you looking at, oh, it's 45-minute job access, so the critical thing is the time.
They did two versions. They did a 45-minute and a 60-minute, so that we could share that one as well. But 60 minutes, of course, shows even more access to jobs. Yeah, so within 45 minutes, how much more you can access from our current system.
So it's timeliness is important.
Downtown.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Chairman, this is a conversation that I'm finding that I'm having frequently with some of our local partners, especially when they're looking at affordable housing and access to jobs, is the concept that as long as they make sure that they have a more affordable housing or more jobs on a transit line, they've checked that box and given people access. We're pushing back a little bit on that to raise awareness that just being on a transit line itself does not necessarily mean you have good access. If you're on a transit line, but it still takes you 2 or 3 hours to get to your job and back home, yeah, you have access, but calling that lifeline service is, I think, which is what we in the industry tend to call it, is a stretch. It's almost no access at all. So when we start looking at access, we start looking at it in terms of reasonable access compared to maybe a car, or maybe compared to other types of modes of transportation, where it's not just access, it's equitable and reasonable access.
I just have a question, and wanted to analyze it all, but in choosing where you live, particularly those that are living in more affordable housing, isn't transportation and access and some of those things a part of the decision making? Go ahead, please.
I was going to say, absolutely. I think that it is a part of the decision making. Unfortunately, what we find is that when you have the ability to make those decisions, when you have the ability to choose between transit and a car, and the amount of money that you have to put into your housing, the amount of time that you have to get your job, the higher your income, the more you're afforded to have that option, that choice. When your income goes below a certain threshold, you're limited to the available affordable housing on the market. And unfortunately, we do have a very significant shortage of affordable housing in this region, and where that is going and where that's gone. And so if you have the ability to get something that you can afford, but it's much further away, you might have to choose that versus something that is close into transit that is much more expensive. and you have to balance, where do you put your dollar? Do you put your dollar on your housing, or do you put it on your transportation, or do you put it on your food? So having to choose between those, people don't always make what we would think would be the best choice just because of the limited options available to them. So yes, you're right. People need to be considering that. However, sometimes with limited incomes, it's not that easy to make that decision.
Well, how engaged are we, welcome are we in the conversations of where affordable housing is going to be? How much are people, talking to GRTC as they, create zones and these stuff?
I'd say that conversation in the past, probably, I haven't been here but a year and a half, but my experience in other agencies and when I first got here is that we didn't have a lot of discourse there. There wasn't a lot of engagement. Transit tended to be an afterthought. I would say there's a growing momentum towards including transit early in those conversations and considering the placement, and the very fact that many people are thinking about putting affordable housing on transit. It's a huge step forward that they're considering that up front. The next phase, of course, is to not just have them consider it, but understand the implications of placing affordable housing and quality jobs on accessible transit, not just a transit line. So we're included in the conversations, we're getting there, but it's not where we need to be. We really need to be a lot more active in those conversations and a harder push to be incorporated in the decision-making early on.
It would be good for everybody to check out this latest McGuire Woods report that James Dyke and others have done on how zoning has affected the availability of affordable housing and the spread of it, that is, and restricted it so that there's not enough and it's not spread. And I think there's some real attention being paid there as well. And that came out yesterday. Very important report.
I'll try to find it and throw a link in the chat.
Yeah, thank you. Adrian, I think we're ready.
All right, one last slide. What's next? So we're currently refining the financial projections to make sure we have a good base as we develop these scenarios. We hope to complete that by the end of the month. And then we'll start our outreach and engagement on the concept priorities. Someone already touched on it, kind of what is the ideal split in terms of this policy decision out there, whether it's 60-40, 70-30, what kind of ridership or coverage footprint do we want to see out there? And so that is going to kick off. Hopefully we'll have our website up and a survey out this week is the goal. So we'll be putting those maps out there for people to be able to react. And then we're getting back together with that same group from the original core design, and we'll be developing that recommended plan, kind of pulling from the concepts we already developed. And that will be happening, we're looking at that midweek, March 15th, to get that done. And then we'll develop the draft plan in April. That should be complete, with the final plan being developed by the end of May. So an aggressive timeline, but we'll get it done.
So two questions about your suggested route structure, both in coverage and in the other. Do you has there been how do you get to how do you get to Sergeant Reynolds from Parham and Brook? I mean, that's the most critical destination on the extension of the route.
Yeah. I don't think we talked about that actually in the core design. And I think what we ended up just stating with Jarrett was that, because he saw that as an extreme need since it's a community college and usually wants to be on a transit line, but they said that they have their own vehicles and their own service. So it may not be as much of a need as we would think it would be normally when you're developing transit. So that I think was actually held off. So it's not, maybe if we did another Parham in the future, but the one that we developed in both these scenarios doesn't touch that Parham.
Okay, I've had some conversations with them on that, so I'll talk to you about that offline. And the other one is, did you consider at all creating direct access to the airport out Route 60 through Fulton?
I did not mention that. Sorry. In the coverage concept, we actually go out Williamsburg Road from the 4B and go out to White Oak Village. Does not go, in this concept, doesn't go directly to the airport, but it does increase service to White Oak Village for people in that area. So that's similar to the Greater Richmond Phase 2, where they have the service on Williamsburg Road.
So, but Sirius connections, that is ridership connections to the airport and to the current Amtrak station are not in either plan.
The one on Staples Mill,
Yeah,
the Amtrak station, they do have the 79 and 18 do have, let's see, in this scenario, and the ridership does have increased service to 30 minutes on Route 18. So it would have enhanced service to Amtrak.
but no direct service to the airport. That 7
No
is
direct service.
that's
It's still
7
the
is
Route
a,
7.
yeah, okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
yes, I think you asked the question of how do we get to J. Sergeant Reynolds from Brook and Perham. We did have service to J. Sergeant Reynolds out there when we were going to Virginia Center Commons in the past. And that route was eliminated, I guess, because of funding. But we did have service there.
okay. Good. Well,
And it started at, it left from Azalea and Brook and went out to Route 1, out to, I guess that's, I believe it's Burnham, whatever. And it made a left turn and went down to J. Sergeant Reynolds and through the campus of J. Sergeant Reynolds. Back, and then went to Virginia Center Commons. It was a loop. Also to that Walmart right there too. Went through that back of that parking lot.
right. Thank you.
So you may have some data on that, Adrian.
I did hear about it. I haven't seen the ridership. Yeah, we can look back and see if we see how it actually did.
Well, Reynolds has its own buses. They could also have a shuttle from Parham and Brook to their campus. It's a half mile, and that would be a very easy thing for them to do. But what it does do is it provides direct service from the entire city to Reynolds. Right now, if you want to get to the Reynolds campus by public transit, you actually have to go downtown to their campus and then catch another bus to the Parham campus. Anything else, Adrian?
That is it.
Well, this is wonderful. Have you created a criterion which enables you the distinction between regional routes that are fundable by CVTA and local routes?
That is on our agenda for part of the core design. We are working with consultants to kind of come up with a recommendation based on kind of just how the system works today. And then we'll work with that same group to go over the recommendation and then also review it with you guys. So it has not been established yet.
Okay. Any further questions? Thank you so much for your work. I know you're working on this constantly right now. All righty. So GRTC annual report, Ms. Rose Pace.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. The annual report is a digital document that we create every year. It's a visual one-stop overview of GRTC, our activities and our accomplishments over the past calendar year. I think most importantly, it's done as part of our commitment to full transparency. We provide extensive data, financials, ridership information, not just for the past year, but for previous years as well, so that readers can see comparisons over time to growth or reduction, depending on what the topic is. This includes planning information, and this year, an overview of the Central Virginia Transportation Authority. We write it in such a way that it's digestible. It's a narrative. We use storytelling, and you also get to hear directly from our CEO at the beginning and the end. And in this instance, of course, we spend quite a bit of time talking about COVID-19, the impacts, and our response to the pandemic. And you'll recognize as I show screen in just a moment, the design. It does extend our brand. It is using recognizable imagery and themes that we use throughout our advertising and marketing resources, including over the past year with our operator recruitment campaign. And as I get ready to share my screen, I will let everyone watching know that we usually get about 1,000 readers every year of the annual report. So this is a document that is referenced not just by the board and by our decision makers, but also by members of the media who use this as a reference point for data. Before I move on, can everyone see the screen full? You should see a purple screen full. Okay, great. I see thumbs up. Excellent. This is just a couple of spread previews of what you will see once this is posted online. I mentioned that you'll hear from our CEO at the beginning and the end. You'll recognize some of this imagery as well, including at our pulse station and out at the airport. This was imagery that we took prior to the pandemic and continue to use in some of our marketing campaigns. Throughout the report, you'll also see in the green box quotations that we've pulled from news articles or public meetings where there was reference to GRTC. And this is what the cover will look like. Again, you may recognize some of that imagery from our recent Route 111 campaign, as well as our Henrico expansion out on West Broad Street. I do want to thank members of the board for contributing your biographies, as well as brief quotations to include in the annual report. I think that this will be helpful for our readers to connect with you as the decision-making body helping to guide GRTC overall. And I do want to also highlight that we will be including in the annual report information about our Route 111 launch, as well as a sneak peek at the passenger improvements that have already begun, including some of the amenities that we are deploying this year. The annual report in recent years has been a calendar year report, meaning that it encompasses from January 2020 to December 2020, and we produce this in the winter as a result. However, I do want to alert everybody that this will be our final calendar year version of the report, and this allows us to remarry the data with the narrative. In recent years, this has been a calendar year narrative, but the data presented was fiscal year. So we want to realign the data with the narrative. So we will be coming back to you again this fall as we conclude fiscal year 21 with our fiscal year 21 final data, as well as the narrative for fiscal year 21. This annual report will be posted online, likely this week, and we will send out the link to everyone on the board, as well as post this information publicly on our website at ridegrtc.com. Are there any questions?
Is this also in hard copy?
We can absolutely print this and make it available for you in hard copy format. We have in recent years transitioned to an exclusively digital format. I believe the last time it was presented as a book was around 2011.
Wow, thank you. Any questions? I saw all y'all's beautiful pictures and quotes. Very impressive. We've got a good board. Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Rosepace, for this work.
Thank you all.
Yeah. All right, Ms. Tisdale, we have the RideFinders annual report.
Okay. Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Good morning. Well, RideFinders prepares an annual report that is a mandated component of the grant application process with the Richmond Regional Transportation Planning Organization. This report is also used as supplementary documentation for all other funding requests as well. The annual report captures the highlights of RideFinders' governance, funding, operations, services, activities, and accomplishments that clearly indicate why RideFinders continues to be an award-winning, fiscally responsible division of GRTC and a viable part of the regional transportation and mobility tapestry. Today's presentation, though there are a lot of slides, is a condensed version of the full report. You will, however, note a distinct difference between this report and the GRTC report that Carrie just presented. Notably, in the financial details that I am providing, due to the fact that GRTC's financials are presented to you during the monthly board meetings, and my reports are presented to the RideFinders Advisory Board and other state agencies on a quarterly and/or monthly basis. And so with that, I will now proceed to our PowerPoint presentation.
Am I right, Ms. Tisdale, in saying that the members of this board of GRTC are also the board of RideFinders?
Exactly, and that is included in our report
All right.
as well. So I will proceed. Can you see my report? No,
Not yet, Vaughn. No.
not yet. Let's go back. What happened here? I am so sorry. Okay. Share. It should be, I do apologize. So here well, at least you see me again. I don't know what
They say that it takes
actually, and this is so sad because I did.
No, you're good.
Vaughn, would you like me to team viewer you?
Would you?
So while they're working on that, Mr. Campbell, members of the board, really excited about the annual report that Carrie provided, that you'll be able to see that. There were some delays in getting that out. I take full responsibility because I asked for some changes away from the prior format, which was very table-based, into a different format. What Vaughn's about to show you is, like, as she said, very different, that we show you the GRTC overall financials every single month and go through them in detail, but you don't have the same opportunity to look at Vaughn. So she'll go into a little bit more detail as soon as that comes up, to be able to provide you some more details about how transit demand management is an essential component of our transportation mobility solutions in the region. Vaughn, I'm just going to keep talking until you're ready.
Okay,
So.
well.
Vaughn, I don't see you on your computer. Where are you trying to do this from?
From my laptop.
Okay.
It worked just fine on yesterday.
Well, what I can also do is, if you give me a second, I might be able to bring up the board packet. And I can show it from my screen. Or Rob, do you have the board packet?
Yeah, I can grab it. Julie, hold on.
I do apologize, my goodness.
That's okay. Getting it. Bear with me 1 second, please.
It's a race, Rob.
30 to 52. Okay. Can you all see that?
Yes, sir.
No.
Yep. Vaughn, you got it?
No, I can't. Okay.
Vaughn, it's on page 1. If you have your printed
Okay,
copy,
then I will proceed, and I do apologize, but I don't want to hold you up any longer, so I don't know what happened here, but I'll move forward. All right, our very first slide just is an introductory slide, RideFinders Annual Report, a condensed version. And what I'll go over today on the second slide is this tells about our fundings and financials, our programs and activities, and then there will be a closing. And should there be any questions, I'll be happy to entertain those as well. I'll move to the next slide. And Mr. Campbell, as you said, RideFinders Advisory Board is the very same as the GRTC Governing Board. And on the original composition, we do list the names of all the directors and the jurisdictions they represent and the titles. RideFinders, in addition, has an advisory board of which Mr. Milliken used to serve as the chair. We have representatives from several jurisdictions on there, the Greater Richmond Chamber of Commerce, federal representation, state representation, and private citizen who provides input and guidance. In addition, we have a staff of 6, and that narrative talks about our funding, which I'll show in the next slide with the numbers that are represented in the narrative. We receive most of our funding, the bulk of it, from the Plan RVA or the RRTPO, from CMAQ, Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality, for the air pollution reduction programs. At the top of the slide, the $135,000 represents a special project, which would have been the carpool incentive program accessible to all of the jurisdictions. However, that has been placed on hold due to the fact that we could not promote ride sharing, placing people in close proximity because of COVID-19. On an annual basis, the TPO provides a base funding of $500,000, and then according to CPI and the index, it's increased in those incremental amounts. We also receive CMAQ money from the Tri-Cities Crater Planning District for about $35,000 each year. We also receive funding from DRPT and state aid. We typically apply for $100,000, of which $80,000 comes from the state, and $20,000 is a requirement for the local match. We're pleased to say that the city of Richmond, the counties of Chesterfield and Henrico supply that $20,000 in equal amounts of $7,500 each to support RideFinders programs. And we move to our financial statement, which is taken straight from the audit report, and it shows exactly where the money goes that we do get. I would note that in 2019, you'll see about, to 2020, about $200,000 decrease in expenditures, which is directly related to the impacts of COVID-19. Notably in the areas of transit tickets and other retail, which is the transit fare media that RideFinders sells. We have been one of the biggest outlets for sales for the financial transit fare media. You'll also notice it in advertising and promotion. We decreased the marketing intangible outlets that had costs associated with it, used a lot of social media in the past year, also in Vanpool assistance from the 31,000 to the 21,000, because of course, some of the Vanpools were terminated and or parked, and in professional development because none of the staff attended any conferences, all were virtual and online. We move to the last page of the financials, which is the audit. On the right-hand side, that's from the Commonwealth of Virginia. Every 3 years, they do a triennial compliance review, and we're proud to say we passed that with flying colors. And we do the external audit, which was presented earlier in this fiscal year for last year, and we also were in compliance in that area as well. We will now move to the programs and services, which just shows the menu of the services that we provide that are free to businesses and to individual commuters. Certainly, we promote all of the ride sharing modalities, but also motorized and non-motorized, as in biking and walking and telework, and supplementary and complementary services to support those, such as the emergency ride home, and remaining heavily involved in transportation planning organizations and processes. These are programs by the number. I make a joke and I say that we track everything except the breaths that we take on a daily basis. However, our clientele, it shows how the program is performing. We provide these numbers to Department of Rail and Public Transportation. They use it in their General Assembly report and to other organizations and stakeholders. What I will note that is even prior to COVID, we did form 9 new Vanpools in FY20. We had prided ourselves on having a very robust Vanpool program and maintaining the Vanpool fleet. And the transit passes screen, as I said, we did a lot of, before Zero Fare Transit, we did a lot of selling and being a main resource center that was accessible and convenient for our customers to buy the transit passes and for employers to order as well. This gives a low-end estimate of the impact of those, of the magnitude route, really, of those sales. And we took the lowest common factor. For instance, if it was a one-day unlimited pass, we really just counted it as 2 trips, no matter how many trips the individual may have taken. For last year, that was total to 36,000, a little under 37,000 transit fare passes sold, amounting to a low-end estimate of a little over 194,000 trips. If you compare that to FY19, we sold a little under 50,000 transit fare media passes, equaling about 260,000 trips. So you'll see that impact of COVID in that respect. We moved to the Vanpool program, which is entitled Our Van. This is the NTD data that is supplied to GRTC, for which they provide a seat subsidy payment to the Vanpool providers. But we also get that information. We check it before it's sent to GRTC to verify the accuracy of it, but it also helps with the vehicle emissions data that I'll get to in just a moment. And as we move forward, here we are, the emissions data. Now, this is just from those who record their trips or non-trips. But the importance of it is that the sustainability strategies that RideFinders employs and promotes to individual commuters and businesses are not only a cost-effective alternative to increasing roadway capacity and the efficiency of the transportation network, but they also result in significant emissions reduction for the region. These reductions in vehicles on the road and vehicle emissions help improve both the air quality and the quality of life in the greater Richmond region by significantly decreasing the adverse impacts of pollutants on the environment and the public health. In fact, research several years ago conducted by SIR showed that RideFinders programs and services resulted in removing approximately 5,000 single occupancy vehicles off the road on a daily basis pre-COVID. So it shows that our programs are very impactful and they do affect our region in a positive manner. What I have here are just pictures of the programs that we piggyback off with and support DRPT and our sister agencies to promote the modalities. Tri-Transit Week is not a competitive environment. It is more of a supportive and collaborative effort to increase awareness of all the programs and the availabilities of transportation options in the region. So there we go, Tri-Transit. Certainly telework has been huge. And I show this slide because our software developer, Agile Mile, we ran a campaign to encourage folks during the telework campaign, and we exceeded the goals that we had established. Because of that, Agile Mile donated $500 to Feed More on behalf of RideFinders. And our Clean Air campaign, you see somebody there who looks familiar. What we did do, because we could not push ride sharing, we did promote education and awareness and safety tips. And because we didn't do some of the marketing we typically do, we took advantage of all the social media platforms and we utilized staff. We started an initiative, Visits with Vaughn, for me to share tips with the community and to stay actively engaged. And we use other staff. We see Brigitte and Sharika here, but we had other videos utilizing all of the staff in-house just to remain viable, visible, and an active part of the community. And of course, I'm always proud about our awards. We did share that we won awards in this fiscal year, but I just want to let you know that that's not an uncommon part of our experience. We also won awards last fiscal year. So in closing, I'm delighted to have had this opportunity to provide you with a snapshot of what RideFinders does, both quantitatively and qualitatively. We are your award-winning organization and are very proud that the boots on the ground real team, RideFinders, consistently strives for excellence in service, functionality, resourcefulness, fiduciary responsibility, and innovation to exceed expectations. I operate in the belief that one of the greatest assets of any company, in addition to revenue stream, is its human capital. And so it is my pleasure to share this report with our board of directors, stakeholders, and all interested entities. The RideFinders is well worth your financial investment, your trust, and your support. A complete copy of the RideFinders FY20 annual report can be found at the link that is included here. And if there are no questions, or if you have some, I'll be happy to answer them. If there are not, then I am finished with presenting this information. And once again, please accept my apologies for, I'll just call it a malfunction.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Tisdale. Are there any questions or comments on this? Well, personally, I want to congratulate you on the continued quality of this work and express to you my gratitude that with as little attention as I pay to oversight of this area of my responsibility, you do, it is just amazing what you do. And it's the quality of it is clear, and your fidelity and dependability have been so important to us. So thank you very much.
Well, I certainly appreciate it, and I could not accomplish it without the support of senior management and also having a very excellent staff to work with as well.
That's great. Any other comments? Thank you so much. And now I think, Ms. Rose Pace, I think we're dealing with Black History Month.
That's right, Mr. Chair. Every February, which is Black History Month, GRTC recognizes 4 honorees. We try to balance between 2 who are still living and 2 who are from the past. And we receive nominations throughout the year, and we usually have a pretty deep bench of honorees that we can draw from. And that was exactly true for us this year. So I will share my screen so that you can see the honorees that we have if you have not already seen them on our social media account. But each week we honor a different Black History Month honoree. And the theme for this year, it's essential workers, which we feel was appropriate during the ongoing pandemic. Our first week's honoree is Rosa D. Bowser. She was the first African-American educator in the public school system here in Richmond, Virginia. She was born before the Civil War. Elvin R. Cosby, who, if you can believe it, worked for more than 70 years in Henrico County Public Works. He just retired in 2019, so we were really excited to be able to honor him as our second week Black History Month honoree. This was one of our submissions that we received from one of the granddaughters of Dr. Robert Walter, also known as Whirlwind Johnson. He was the first African-American doctor to have practice rights in the Commonwealth of Virginia. He practiced at Lynchburg General Hospital. And of interest, in addition to breaking that barrier within public health, he also loved tennis. And he was a mentor to Arthur Ashe and helped teach him tennis as well. So he has a connection to a previous honoree. And then finally, a face that will be familiar to so many of us in the GRTC family is our retired Supervisor, Jenny Bullock. She is our final Black History Month honoree this year. She broke 2 glass ceilings when she worked at GRTC. She was the first female GRTC Transportation Supervisor and also the first African-American female Transportation Supervisor. And she retired several years ago. But we are so delighted to be able to continue our tradition of recognizing Black History Month and featuring these important stories, both from the past and recent years, as part of our ongoing commitment to supporting Black History Month each year.
And how do we put these out?
At the end of January, we send out a press release, post the information on our website as well. They are featured on the homepage. There's a banner that talks about Black History Month. And then each week on our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, we share the images and the stories of each of the honorees. Normally, when it's not the pandemic, we would also feature their names on the exterior destination header signs on the buses rotating through each week. But unfortunately, of course, right now we need to feature the mask mandate.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you for this good work, and congratulations to our own retiree who received this award. All right, operating report, Mr. Barham.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, everyone. Wanted to spend just a few minutes going over the operating performance for this past month. There are 3 areas that I'm going to be focusing on. Number 1 is, of course, the KPIs, the key performance indicators. Basically, we've been holding steady. The post-pandemic numbers have been pretty much the same. But there's one area I wanted to kind of touch on, which has been a slight improvement, and some things we're working on to address that in terms of absenteeism and the scheduled trips that are operated. Next, I'll be touching on recruitment, continue with our recruitment efforts through advertising, also recruiting through CDL training schools, and some work that we hope to get dividends from with veterans. I want to touch on that real briefly. And finally, the federal mask mandate. Wanted to talk about that. Went into effect February the 1st as mandated by the new administration. So first, let me my screen share going. And this is page 61 of the board packet. And I just want to touch on a couple of things. Like I said earlier, the on-time performance, the numbers in terms of ridership have been pretty much steady. Ridership, of course, is part of the FIS report on page 67 of your report. So it's been proportionately less in terms of the ridership from a year ago, pretty steady from the last few months because of the pandemic. But a couple areas I do want to touch on, those first 2 slides, where you see the lost time rate, which is the absenteeism, and also the scheduled trips operated. And they are proportionate to each other. Obviously, if you have operators, chances are you're going to have more buses out there available to take care of the customers. A couple of things as far as why we've improved in that area. One has to do with the fact that the COVID cases went down during the month of January. We did have a few amount of COVID cases and contact tracing as a result. Also, January is not a high month in terms of vacations and leaves, so we have fewer operators that are off during the month of January. Right at the end of January, the new booking went into effect. So we reduced the number of runs down to 232, which allows us to have more operators on the extra board to be able to cover more open work. So that hopefully will help out as we go into the months ahead with this current booking. And the last thing we've done over this past month, started in late January going into February, is we've done an improvement to our daily tracking of absenteeism. We do a report every day of the previous day's work showing how we performed operationally to kind of give us a snapshot, the operators that we used and the extra operators, overtime operators and so forth. So we're able to get a better handle on how we're managing that. And hopefully as we get into the few months ahead, we'll see some. Specialized transportation, our on-time performance actually went up this past month to 93.5%. So we're real excited about that in terms of how we improved in that area. One other thing I want to note in terms of specialized transportation, Buddy Shearer, all probably familiar with Buddy, longtime employee and family member of GRTC, has been here for over 46 years. Well, Buddy is finally retiring. I think this is his second or third retirement. We lose count, but we're excited that he is retiring and wish him well. And Mia Bailey, who is the current trainer, or rather for First Transit, she last week stepped into position as the general manager managing that service. So we want to wish Buddy well and welcome Mia into her new role as we continue to make improvements with that service.
Well, please congratulate Buddy on behalf of the board and thank him for his work, Tim. And I'm looking at your transportation on-time performance.
Yes.
And that doesn't seem to have changed much. That's
No, it's been pretty much the same. In fact, it's only less than a percentage point difference, and it's been pretty steady like that the last few months. We've had construction and ongoing road work over the last few months, and also what is reflective upon that, which you probably see more into February, is inclement weather. We've had some right at the end of January. We had our first storm effect, and then also the last few weekends in February. So you'll probably see some changes in that over the last few weeks as well. But conversely, as we continue to go through each booking, we look to make improvements in terms of how we are performing. And her team did make some adjustments to some of the schedules for the January booking. So hopefully we'll, conversely, as we get through winter, we should hopefully see some improvements in that area with the improvements that they made, along with our constant monitoring of the service as well.
Well, I am really watching that. I mean, I don't think that's a good number, and I'd like to see that. Yeah. No,
our goal is much higher than that, as you can see, 80% goal. So, and as Julie and others have mentioned over the last few months, we are managing or working on that area. It's nowhere near what we need to be and should be. So we're continuing to work on that as we move ahead.
Thank you.
So the second area I wanted to touch on is recruitment. Currently, we're at 268 full-time and 18 part-time operators. And, three areas that we're looking at in terms of how it's up. One being is advertising, commercials. You may have seen the second round of commercials that came out over the last few weeks. I want to thank Carrie, Rick Bradshaw, and the marketing team on updating and putting those commercials out. We have seen people come in the door, and as a direct result of those commercials airing, so we continue to hope that we get good quality candidates from that endeavor. Second, the HR department, from their recruiting efforts, going into the CDL training schools. Shipper's Choice is one of them, and some others. As people go through those training schools, we go into those classes, introduce ourselves so that we can bring folks in to hopefully become candidates in the driving ranks. Third area that we are starting to look at doing is recruiting veterans. Fort Lee, right down the road, as soldiers matriculating to civilian life, retiring from the military, with driving background as well as maintenance backgrounds. We're looking to tap into that opportunity to be able to bring some veterans forth with us as well. Veterans tend to be, pretty stringent in terms of their availability, and dedication and so forth. So we hope that we get some good qualified candidates from the veteran ranks as we, pursue that option as well.
Tim, what age person it would be our normal recruit?
Well, 21 is the minimum age. What we found over the last, group of classes, we've had several people come to us from the school bus ranks and also from the tour bus. Because of the pandemic, we've had several of those tour bus companies to either reduce or shut down the service altogether. So we found folks coming to us, looking for that next career. So we've had people in their 30s and 40s or even older come to us. But even though our minimum age is 21.
So we tend not to get people right at 21, 23, 24.
No, it's very few of those. And HR could probably give us some more numbers, accurate numbers. But I'm involved in those interviews, and from what I can tell, it's probably somewhere in the 40s that we're getting, on average.
Thank you.
And finally, the third initiative I wanted to touch on is the federal mask mandate. The new administration put out the mandate for all transportation, requiring everyone to wear a mask. We've had a mask mandate for quite some time here at GRTC as part of our regular pandemic initiatives. But what we want to do also to make sure that we're in compliance with this federal mandate is that we've put updated information on the buses as well as on the website through social media, so that people will be further educated in terms of what what is the requirement and so forth. Also, all of our operators are equipped with extra masks. So in case customers are not wearing a mask as they board, they're reminded as such. And if they don't have one, we can provide one to them so that we can continue with the service as opposed to stopping the service if they're not in compliance. And also to address any issues or concerns with people that may give pushback in reference to wearing a mask. All of our operators went through de-escalation training. I think Tony has mentioned it in prior board meetings. Every operator this past fall went through that de-escalation training so that they'll be equipped with how to handle those issues if we do have some customers on board that aren't in compliance. And as we continue with that mandate and with all of our other mandates as well, we want to make sure that this is a place not only to work, but for also the transporting of our customers. We're looking at also installing thermometers at several strategic places in the facility so that people can be able to as they get into the building or as they report to work at the dispatch windows. So we're continuing to make sure that we are doing things proactively when it comes to COVID-19. What I want to just finish by saying that, like I said earlier, the KPIs have been pretty much steady over the past month. We'll continue to monitor and hopefully make improvements as we move forward. We're going to do our recruiting efforts to bring in good qualified candidates, because as Adrian mentioned earlier, as we go into a more regionalization of the service, and as the pandemic winds down, hopefully this year, ridership will come back. And we want to make sure that we're ready for that ridership and that we're available to be able to provide more service as it warrants. And also, as we continue to battle this pandemic, because it's not over yet, we want to make sure that we continue to follow the mandates that are in place, follow the CDC guidelines, and make sure that we are in compliance and provide safe service. Unless there are any questions, that concludes my operations report.
Questions to Mr. Barham? Well, we hope with this fine package that we've approved with our union that folks will see that this is a really good employment opportunity and that we can increase our personnel not only to cover our existing service, but also to enable us to expand with the CVTA route expansion.
Yes, sir.
And thank you very much for your good work, Mr. Barham. Your reliability on this is really important to us.
Thank you.
Mr. Carter.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning,
Morning.
members of the board. I'll be going on the safety performance report for the month of January. I'd like to touch on 3 areas of the actual report. These numbers do give us somewhat mixed results back, but feel like we need to go over them just to explain a little bit and give you a little bit of explanation. Starting with the external accidents for the month of January. We did have 33 accidents in the month of January, and in December we had 32, so we did increase by 1. Non-preventable accidents, we had 26 in the month of January, which is up 3 from the month of December. Bus contacts with fixed objects, in 8 we did have we had 8 in January, which was up from the month of December by 2. Just to give you some explanations on these for the external accidents, as I stated, we did go up by 1, but if you remember, on January the 31st, we had our first snowstorm of the year. And I think we had 3 to 4 accidents on that day. So that kind of shot our numbers over a little bit. We were on pretty good track for that month. Non-preventable accidents, as I stated, we did go up, but remember that those are accidents that are no fault of the operator. Fixed objects, have some work to do with that, and we've come up with some new investigative techniques along with some training techniques. One being to actually have the operators sit down with the training supervisors just to go over the accident. That gives them an opportunity for second-by-second playback as to see what they're doing leading up to the actual accident and to see the accident. This allows the training supervisors to go over what they need to do to correct those accidents and to prevent them. Overall, the feedback we've been getting from that has been excellent. It allows them, as I stated, to really pay attention to what they do and some of the things they need to change so that we can prevent those accidents from happening. It also gives us a causational analysis, gives us data-driven data so that we can look at these type of accidents, the locations, when they're happening, how they're happening, and we can maybe eliminate some of the external factors to mitigate those losses. Like I said, overall, everybody's been doing a good job. We've been getting good feedback from that. We want to make sure that we're in collaboration with the actual training department and the risk management department when it comes to looking at these accidents to get out ahead of them and try to drive those numbers down. And with that being said, if there are no more questions, that concludes the safety performance report for the month of January.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Carter. Any questions?
Yeah, Mr. Carter, are you still using the simulator for accidents and things like that?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Everybody goes through simulator. Everybody, you know, that's a real big thing, especially as Tim mentioned, when the new hires come in, they're excited to get in there until they actually get in there and we put them through some situations that really gives them an opportunity to see what they may be facing out there on the actual street. But yeah, that's an excellent training tool that we have.
Is there an update on that simulator that you use? Have you received one lately?
I do know that Mark and Tanya and the training department are looking into updating that. That's something that's definitely on the agenda coming soon for updates on that. But like I said, the main thing about the simulator is just giving them the opportunity, and with the information that we have now and the programs that we have now, we're able to do that. But yes, the updates are coming.
Right.
I have a question. This just maybe, I'm sorry, you wanted to speak on that, Julie?
No, Mr. Braxton, please go ahead.
Oh, and it may be just anecdotal information, and Tim brought it up as well. I mean, how much pushback are we getting from people in terms of the mask mandates? I mean, are we, you know, is it an issue? Is it, you know, to what level, you know, is it rising to? I mean, I'm always just floored when I go places and, you know, it says right on the door and people will walk around chin strapping or no mask or whatever. So what's it looking like for us?
Well, initially we did have some issues. We did have some some feedback, some kickback from the actual passengers. I think the main thing about it when it comes to the mask is not only enforcing it, but making the public understand why we're actually doing it. We're not trying to make it hard for anybody. We're not trying to inconvenience everybody. We're trying to keep everybody as safe as possible. Once we got that message out and the education out, and Carrie has done a wonderful job with providing that information. Tim mentioned that we're updating the flyers that are going on the actual buses, and educate the people as to the public as to why we're actually doing that. That's greatly reduced the I guess you could say the confrontational aspects of it.
Mhm.
We have had some situations where we've had to contact RPD and escort people off the buses, but that's far and few in between. Most of the time we can de-escalate the situation, just explain to them what's going on, and try to get everybody from point A to point B as safe as possible.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you very much, Mr. Carter, for that report.
Thank you.
I think now we have Adrian Torres. I believe we have a Transportation Alternative Program / Landing Pad project.
Yes.
Mhm.
Hello again. I'm going to share my screen. All right. All right, just a little bit of a background on this project. We were actually applied for funds back in 2016 to kind of do a pilot project where we could bring all of our landing pads, which are basically a 5 by 8 foot slab of concrete at all of our bus stops for riders to be out of the dirt and the mud, especially beneficial for people who are in mobility devices, for boarding and alighting. To bring those up to standard, because our bus stops currently are in varying conditions. We have some great sidewalks, especially in the downtown area of the city, but there are some that are in ditches, others that are just constantly muddy. So in this effort, we applied for these funds, received them in 2017, and with the Transportation Alternative Program, which is money from FHWA through VDOT. The amount was $150,000 with a 20% local match that we have already earmarked for this project. And in the scope of this one, it's 29 landing pads, and the picture of the map below shows where those locations of those 29 are. And like I mentioned, this is a pilot. GRTC is going to do this 29, but we have been aggressively working with the jurisdictions who also have the same goal. So they have various projects that they're already working on. Henrico County has STAR studies, streetscape improvements that they plan on doing in the near future. And the city of Richmond actually also applied for CMAQ funds, and they will be working on a very similar complementary project in the near future to do more landing pads, and some of them actually include sidewalk improvements. So we have actually a full list of those that we know need to be upgraded, and are going through now and analyzing those that can. And what I mean by can is that if they're in a ditch or in a huge grade and really would take a huge infrastructure improvement, GRTC, of course, is not going to tackle those. But we are going to see if the city will actually take the list and see if they fit in any current projects. Same with Henrico County as they apply for grants in the future or do any sort of streetscape improvement, see if we can have the goal to get as many bus stops with landing pads as we can over the next few years. So for the TAP project, just some highlights that the IFE was distributed in December 2020 to qualified state contractors. We received 4 bids. The lowest one came in at $67,290. And the way that that project is set up, you have to have funds for contingency. VDOT actually does the administration for all the invoicing. So funds have to be identified for VDOT, and then there is the CEI. So any sort of, on top of the contingency, any other things that may come up is also identified with set aside funds, so additional $12,000. So the total amount that came in actually came in under the 150, so it's $113,000. And we are recommending to move forward with Franco's Liberty Bridge. And they are certified small business and supplier diversity as a small and minority owned business. So we are coming to you guys to ask the board of directors to authorize the CEO to contract with Franco Liberty Bridge for the construction of landing pads in the south side of Richmond to not exceed $150,000, and the grant includes the 20% local match that we have set aside.
All right, so, well, I hope they're using real concrete at Franco Liberty Bridge. And VDOT gets 23,000 for invoicing. That's really good. So could I have a motion to approve this?
So moved.
Second, please.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we approve, authorize the CEO to contract with Franco Liberty Bridge to construct these landing pads. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, it's passed. Thank you.
Thank you.
We move to the financial report. And this is Julie for John, right?
You know what? You would think after a year we would be used to using Zoom, but no, I'm still figuring this out. Let's try this again. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, we are in the middle of cold season, unfortunately, with the weather and everything else going up and down. Our new CFO has lost his voice, so I will be filling in as best I can today for his new style of reporting, which I'm very excited to share with you. I can't wait for you to see it in his own presentation style. So I am sharing with you. You should be able to see page 73 of the board packet. The first few pages of this are his new report style that we're still working through. There are still some areas of it that I'd like to kind of massage based on input from you. However, it is I believe a more intuitive way in some ways of looking at our financials, where it breaks down our revenues first and then goes into our expenses, and then looks at some of our key indicators so we can better track where we are trending and why we're trending. So moving on to the next page, let me make sure that this is big enough that you can see it. Page 74 of the report, like I said, goes into the financials. It's a little bit different way than you're used to seeing it. It breaks it down in where we have our self-generated funds, then we have the funds that are coming from our subsidies from the local, state, and federal. The biggest issue item that you'll see on this page is over under the variance, year-to-date variance for federal funds. That's line 4,500 federal funds, and you'll see that that is an unfavorable variance of about $1 million, which is a large contributing factor to our unfavorable variance for the year for our revenues. Now, scrolling down to the next page, under page 76, he's broken that down so you can see it in a chart. And it makes it a little bit, I think, more visual, that you can see the discrepancy or the unfavorable variance in the federal. His analysis is then provided directly after that, where the discussion about why we're running unfavorable budget with the federal really has to do with the timing. We get our federal money as a reimbursement, not before, but after we spend the money, we can then draw it down. So our drawdowns being unfavorable to budget would be a timing issue of, one, we're not spending as much on either the CARES Act or the PM as we expected, or the drawdown itself is slightly delayed. So either of those being issues that we are managing and controlling, but allow us to maintain our budget and on trend. And it's being offset right now with the favorable variances from the state being higher than expected in advertising revenue. We talked about, I guess, a couple of board meetings ago, that the amount of money that we will be receiving from the state was increased. We were notified that when they were able to look at the revenues coming in, that our this year's operational subsidies from the state will be higher than expected, and that is allowing us to offset some of the unfavorable balances. He then goes into this eye chart, which no one but the youngest of us will be able to read. On page 76, we're going to work on breaking this down over multiple pages, but you have it in the board packet, so you can see detail. Don't worry about the detail right now. I'll go to the next page and you'll see how it's broken out. This is a breakout where the first column is looking at our operational expenses about vehicle operations, our vehicle maintenance, our facility maintenance, and then general administration, where general administration actually does have some costs in it that directly support the operations and maintenance of our vehicles, and also includes some overhead and also includes some administration. And this is representative of how we report to the federal government for where we get our drawdowns from the federal and state. And I think there's some good information in there. Again, you can't see it, it's too small. We're going to work on that. But when you roll it up, what he's done is he's giving you the high level of review to look at in a chart of where we are running favorable to unfavorable. And very specifically, vehicle operations is running very, very favorable to budget, where our budget was 18 million and our actuals is closer to 16 million. And our operating expenses also shows that our labor is running very favorable overall. His explanation when he looked into that has to do with our headcount, that we're running favorable because we did expect to have a higher headcount than we actually have. So when you don't have the staff hired, you of course don't spend those dollars. We also have a favorable, the COVID demand for expenses is running favorable. So while we are putting a lot of money into the purchase services, sorry, let me rephrase that. Back up a second, I apologize. This goes ongoing favorable to budget for paratransit. Every month we've been reporting out that we were running very, very favorable to budget for paratransit service, to care service, that when COVID started, we expected that there would be a very high demand for care service as our the community that uses that service might have a higher need to get to hospitals or get to other resources. And what we found is that did not bear out. So the CARES money that we did set aside for that has not been utilized to the full extent, and we continue to run favorable. And we also do have some, that's balanced off and offset by our unfavorable the amount of money that we are spending for the higher cleaning, the higher sanitizing, the higher protection of our staff and our resources. So we are unfavorable by $1 million for materials and supplies. Those do offset and balance out. Some of the other areas that he'll be looking at over the coming months is breaking down our expenses on a cost per mile to really show where some of those drivers are of where we're putting that money and where we're favorable, unfavorable. I find that these are very telling, that show that when you look at the expense per mile budgeted of $10.25 versus the actual, we are running favorable to budget. We're running more effectively and efficiently than we budgeted for. Part of that, of course, is because we have the fewer operators, so our expenses are less. But it starts showing you some of those drivers. We'll also be looking in the future at our headcount. I think some of the headcount areas where it's showing we have a higher headcount than we budgeted, or a lower headcount than we budgeted, has more to do with internal processing. So we're going to work on presenting that in our budget next year, our budget documents in the April-May timeframe, so you can see the breakdown of what positions are being budgeted and increase and decrease in the budget every fiscal year from now on.
Julie, what's the difference? I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Oh,
what's the difference between revenue miles and transportation? What is transportation hours?
The difference between miles and hours. So when we have a bus on the road, we look at those expenses per mile. So the number of miles it's there. If you look at it, another way to look at it is by the number of hours that bus is on the road. So a route that is a local route that has very few miles might actually have a lot of hours it's operating because it's sitting in traffic and it's running at a slower mile per hour, versus a commuter service, which has a large number of miles, but maybe it's running at 60 or 55 miles per hour on the interstate, actually has the same amount or lower hours. So when we look at our expenses and we look at how we're accounting for the cost of a service, we have to break it down by its mode. Sometimes it's more relevant to consider the cost per hour of one mode and a cost per mile of a different mode, or a blended rate. And John is digging into that to develop that blended rate of how we attribute our costs and our expenses to our routes based on how many hours and how many miles for that mode. Does that help?
It does. Thank you.
Okay. It's a way, I believe, a more effective way of looking at our system. We also tend to look at all of our services as a single service. We provide public transit. And in truth, when we start to break it down, we do need to start looking at our costs by pulse, by express and commuter, by local, by paratransit. And having those breakout, those costs and those cost drivers are different for those different markets and business models. When we move forward the next year, you'll start seeing some of that breakout in our financials as well.
And that will make that will really help, I think, to ensure what we're doing is effective and efficient, I believe.
I thank you. I believe so. It's John has only been here now for a month, just over a month. I'm so he's commuting from Connecticut still, and they do say that when the person actually sells their house and moves and buys something down here, you know you got him for good. So I'm still watching carefully that to see when he sells that house, and I'm confident that he's here forever. But he keeps coming back every week, and even with a missed voice, he's on the call today with us in case there are any questions. So I'm pretty sure that we got him. He's doing great work, and I love the direction we're going with our finances.
Well, it's good to break out our operations in different areas or a variety of ways we provide public transit, and then ensuring that that pocket is efficient, and therefore I think overall we'll become more efficient. No question about it.
Thank you. We do get a lot of questions on our finances and our operations of how much of the fare, how much of our miles, how much of our expenses are due to the pulse, or how much are coming from or contributed by express. And we haven't done a good job in the past of breaking that out. I think you'll see the financials moving forward. You'll start seeing some of those breakouts over the coming year. But with that, he started to look at some of our overtime. As we've mentioned, or as I heard mentioned earlier, you will be seeing in a few minutes the new collective bargaining agreement. One of the issues that we had under serious discussion with the union was the high level of overtime that we have, that we budget. And part of that has to do with absenteeism issues, and some of it has to do with how we manage our service. Looking at it from the financials gives us one more lever to be able to understand how effective we are in the service on the street and driving down some of those overtime costs. There's a balance, of course. You want to have a certain amount of overtime to maybe, a goal would probably be closer to 5% versus the 10% we're showing. But being able to track that will show how we are able to manage our service and manage our staffing to be more effective on the street. So this is also going to be a very important metric for us going forward. Also looking at another metric that he's looking at very closely is looking at the actual scheduled mileage that we put on the street, actual mileage we put on it, and the transportation hours and how those are tracking together. They should track more or less together. So I don't have an answer for you on why September 20th is so out of whack, and we're going to be looking at that. But if you look at specifically October, November, and December, you do see that the scheduled miles versus the revenue miles are much further down. And that has to do directly with the amount of quarantines and COVID cases we did experience in the fall, as we had to be able to cut or miss service that we had planned to be able to protect our operators and prevent the spread internally. So I took a lot of time to go through that, and I probably shouldn't have. I probably should just scroll through it and to let you know that next month, John will do a much better job of walking you through this. But I'm so excited by what he's doing. I just couldn't help myself. He also did put in the packet the statements that you're used to seeing. And at the bottom line, the change in that position is that even with all that information, we are still running approximately $2 million favorable to budget for the entire year in our net position. That we are, a lot of our expenses, with the exception of last month, we saw some additional expenses in planning and scheduling with some of the consulting services we have. For the most part, we are still running very favorable to budget. We're unfavorable with our federals, as was discussed, but we are in a good position this year. And with that, I'm going to end the discussion of the finance, and I'm looking forward to next month completely and totally transferring that role over to finance.
Hey, Julie.
Yes, sir.
So I guess one of the unfortunate things that comes out of being so far ahead on the budget is that, you know, we just don't have as many routes running, and, you know, just all the things that have happened through COVID and all of that. Am I thinking about that the right way, that if we were running all those routes and that sort of thing, we'd be closer to budget?
Yes, and if it weren't for COVID, we would probably have more operators, we'd be running more service, and we would be closer to budget. But because we don't have operators, because the operators we do have are being quarantined, is one of the other reasons why we are running more favorable to budget on some of those operating expenses. But that is being offset by the extra expense of the masks and the bus cleanings and the sanitation.
Yep. Okay. And I just wanted to thank John as well. I'm looking forward to how he continues to move us forward on financial reporting. I think it's going to be extremely valuable, as Danny said.
If, Mr. Chairman and members, if there are no further questions, I would move on to the cash flow report.
All right, any further questions? Thank you, and I think this is very exciting too, Julie, the analysis, and John, thank you for that. Okay, cash flow.
Cash flow report begins on page 82 of the board packet. There's not a lot to report here other than good news, and that good news is that when we look at cash flow, that all the money that was used from our contingency fund to cash flow some of the early part of the fiscal year operations and the fluctuations has all been returned back to the reserve. And when we look at our excess and deficiency over the next several months, we will be continuing to run without the need for use of the contingency fund for the next several months. So our cash flow projections are favorable and are balanced. And with that, Mr. Chairman, and the report on cash flow.
All right, that's great. Thank you. Any questions? Ms. Thompson, recent and upcoming procurements.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
On page 84 of your board packet, you will find a list of 8 upcoming or ongoing procurements. The first one is the parking lot resurfacing project. All the staff that I know of is very excited to get this project underway. The solicitation has been posted and bids are due by March 1st, and our facilities department is managing this project. Next is roof repairs and interior painting. In an effort to keep the building in good repair, GRTC will be acquiring services for roof repairs. We do have several leaks throughout the building that are in desperate need of attention, and interior painting. The roof repairs are estimated to cost approximately $125,000. And interior painting, we're going to work on that estimate, massage it, and get it the way it needs to be as we get closer to starting the actual procurement. So more to come with that. Our facilities department will also be handling this procurement as well. Last month, Adrienne presented to you our plan for shelter installation. Just as a refresher, she outlined her plan to install 25 shelters in FY21 and 18 in FY22. So the purchase of shelters will support the plan and is estimated to cost approximately $91,000. Graphic design and timetable printing services is an ongoing need for GRTC. Our planning department utilizes these contracts constantly, and our current contracts are about to expire, and we will start another procurement for those services. Both contracts are estimated to cost approximately $35,000. Next, staff would like to conduct a study for BRT station modifications to determine the feasibility of running articulated vehicles throughout the system to account for high ridership volumes in certain areas. Our planning department will also manage this study, and the estimated cost is $75,000. And lastly, our planning department will be partnering with the city of Richmond to evaluate the use of a parking lot bounded by North 8th Street, North 9th Street, East Clay, and East Lee Streets as a temporary transfer center. The feasibility study is estimated to cost approximately $50,000. That's the end of my report, unless there are any questions.
And the money for those last two planning pieces comes from?
I'm gonna let Adrian elaborate, but it is my understanding that the funding is coming from the city of Richmond.
Adrian?
No, actually, I might actually let Julie clarify a little bit more. So the study for the temporary transfer center is still, just to give some background, we just put our intent of location that we would prefer. The exact location is still something that has to be worked out. So we are just putting out there that in the short term, we will be coming for procurement for a study. The exact location, though, has not been set. That was just our preferred location. So do you want to clarify that from what Tanya said? And then the second one, and the funds for that would be the dollars that we had set aside for a downtown location for design services. So it's money that we've had since 2008 for design services, AE, for a location. And that is just a small amount. I think it was roughly 45,000 is what she said. The second one was the modification for the bus stations. So that's to look at every single station, since they are all unique in grade and somewhat in size, to accommodate the vehicles, looking at it to see if each one could fit articulated and what kind of modifications would need to be done to each station. And those funds are coming from, actually, Julie, what is that fund from?
Those are going to be coming from 5307 and 5339 or a state grant if we're able to get one.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions on these? Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Thompson, for your consistent work and accurate and thorough reporting. We now move to what? Do we have to ratify these? Oh, we have the collective bargaining agreement. Great.
I'm very pleased with this one. I really am. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'm so pleased to be able to come to you today with the collective bargaining agreement that has been in negotiation with APU Local 1220 since October. As previously reported to you in open session, we have been in negotiations with the local union chapter since October of 2020, and we came to a final agreement, a tentative agreement on all items on January 22nd, 2021. The attached package, which I have to inform you has a slight modification, which I'll talk about in a second, provides you with a copy of the full contract language with track changes, and also with the tentative agreements that were approved also in track changes to make it easy to see what the differences are between the prior contract and the proposed contract that I hope will be ratified today. All the items in this package are consistent with GRTC policy direction and the budget limits provided to the negotiating team in executive sessions by the GRTC board throughout the negotiation process. Before I move on in my notes, I just did want to mention that the difference will be that you'll see in your packet. I was talking with the union president this weekend, and on page, I will scroll through really quickly, on page 96 of the packet, there's an item number 24 that is in the tentative agreements that did not get copied over into the collective bargaining agreement draft. That will be in there. So you'll see in the tentative agreements, but it didn't get copied over in the presentation I gave to you. That will be corrected. The other correction is that on section, let me get the page 130 of the board packet, which is 32 of the contract, section 25 shows blank as reserved. That was originally for small vehicles program, which in prior contracts was set as struck through and reserved, but was not to be taken out, just struck through and reserved in case we ever wanted to put a small vehicle program back. I inadvertently deleted that. That will also be put back in as a strike through and a reserve in case we do want to advance a small vehicle program in the future. So those are the only two corrections from the packet that we sent out that were fixed over this weekend. And I appreciate very much the union president looking through this and getting that information back to me this weekend. With that, so along with the collective bargaining agreement, management and the union also reviewed management's upcoming proposed changes to operator work rules. Management carefully considered all the union comments on the proposed changes. We made several revisions to the original proposed changes to the work rules based on the comments from the union. When the union went to vote on the CBA, they also did include, I understand, the work rule changes as part of their ballot agenda. And when they voted to approve the tentative agreements, they also understood and voted to approve the proposed changes to the work rules. Finally, on February the 4th, the union president did call me. They had the vote on that day to say that the collective bargaining agreement, tentative agreements had been passed with a 98% approval for all the union that did vote on it, which is a very high approval rating. I think that it is a reflection of the hard work the union and management did to show our dedication, both for the work environment of our staff, for a quality pay and benefits package for our staff, as well as for changes that allowed for an expression of commitment of staff to continue to work their service to our community and to our company, and to advance our mission for service. So with that, with all the information in the packet, I am coming today to ask and request the GRTC Board of Directors ratify the attached CBA as amended through the negotiations with the local union and with those modifications I just mentioned, and ratified through union member vote. Further, with that approval and ratification, I'm requesting the board approve the advance of the economic changes afforded in the collective bargaining agreement to include back pay of straight time wages associated with the 4% increase in operator top pay as of October 1, 2020, and the amount estimated around $150,000, which is within the 2021 adopted budget. Also to ask for approval to enact the Juneteenth paid holiday for all employees in this fiscal year. That's the only holiday remaining in the package for this fiscal year at an estimated cost to GRTC of $65,000, which is also within our favorable budget. And for approval for the increase in employer paid pension contributions effective the next pay period, it won't be back pay, from a 12% contribution to a 13% contribution of pay for all collective bargaining employees at an estimated cost this fiscal year of approximately $75,000 that will begin to put the pension program into balance and solvency. And that is the conclusion of my request to the board.
Thank you. Are there questions or items of discussion among the board?
Hey, Ben, I just would like to mention, I'd like to congratulate Julie and the team, the board, and the new union management. This occurred, it took a lot of work, but I think it's given us a great foundation for our union relationship going forward. So again, I want to congratulate everyone. And with that, I would move to approve.
Is there a second on that?
I will second and echo Gary's sentiment and just hope that moving forward, we will continue to partner with the union as we go into these negotiations.
Yeah, I am touched by this work, and I think the example that this entire operation sets with healthy union management relationships is a good model for for folks in this community to see, because it respects the needs and work of everybody present. So good work. The motion includes approval of the contract, approval of the back pay item to October, approval of the Juneteenth holiday, and of the, congratulations on this, increased pension contributions so we can get closer to our proper pension reserves. Are there any further questions or comments? It's been moved and seconded that we approve this contract with the items I just mentioned. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Oh, it is passed, and congratulations to you and all of your negotiating team and the union for this achievement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It was truly an honor to be part of that team. Cheryl and Tim, myself the entire time, really helping to balance out the conversation and the needs for the agency, and Maurice and Trent on the union side, as well as John Lyons, who came from international, really, I believe, represented our staff well and fought for them. And there were some amazing conversations that we had that really highlighted that we are all trying to work together for the betterment of this agency, our staff, and our riders. And while it was difficult, there's also, at the end of the day, some inspiration to be had that we were able to come together on this package.
That's great. Let's claim the inspiration. All right, so now we have the Administrative Employee Deferred Compensation Plan documents.
Yes, and I believe I will be doing this as well to save our CFO's voice. Let me see if I can share this document. Okay, it starts on page 138 of your board document and page 139 of your board document. These and 140. So it has come to our attention that the 401A and the 457 deferred plan, these are the retirement plans that for the administrative personnel, not for the union. They need occasional and periodic updates to stay in conformance with IRS rules. We are undergoing one of those updates currently, and this recommendation and request would allow for a resolution to let the GRTC Chief Executive Officer and Chief Financial Officer to make such amendments and actions necessary to keep those qualified plans consistent with the rules and regulations of the IRS, and to continue them in a tax deferred status. With that, I don't know if you'd like me to read the resolution, but or stop there, since that wasn't in your package, and just make the request for the recommendation to allow the CEO and the CFO to make such plan document changes as necessary.
So Julie, I am assuming that this has no relationship to increases in our budget expenses, and that it does not basically change the contractual relationships between our people and substance.
That is correct. There is no financial implication of this at this time, but it is specifically to make sure that those plan documents stay consistent and concurrent with rules. I will disclose that as the representative of the board through procurement rules, I have delegated authority to make contract changes up to $50,000. Of course, there is no expected change to this. However, I believe that there are some rules, and I'm talking a little bit out of turn here. John could probably give some more details, but this just allows for that delegated authority to be very clear that the CEO and CFO can do it, but there aren't any physical changes. I'll stop there.
Okay, well, those changes would be reported to us even though you've given delegated authority, correct?
Absolutely, sir.
All right. Are there any further questions or comments on this? And if not, I'd like a motion to approve it.
That's a move.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that the Board of GRTC approves this authorization for changes with the deferred compensation plan to bring it up to conformity with the federal requirements. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, it's been passed. Further, let's see, we got the CEO's report.
Oh, I was moving right past that. I was I thought I was done, but no, sir. I do have more to report. Thank you. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my CEO's report for the month of February, starting with COVID activities, GRTC cases, as Tim reported, did slow since the last board meeting, but in the region, they are still climbing. We are still seeing more cases. Cases are being tracked back primarily to household contact, which indicates our precautions have worked to minimize the spread of COVID between staff members on duty. Nearly every case requires some level of precautionary quarantine. And with that, we are continuing to advance the new service adjustments to help lessen those disruptions associated with quarantines and illness. But there's only so much that we can do as the cases continue to rise. We're chasing that mark every single month from the time COVID started to where we are now. Staff does continue to work with local health departments to determine what vaccines will be available to our frontline staff. I don't know if you saw, there was an article recently in the paper on this exact issue expressing frustration that we still do not have those vaccines available for any staff unless they are 65 or older. We do have hundreds of operators. The majority of them are under 65. And currently the official word is that we are not likely to see the vaccine until at least March. The unofficial word suggests that it might be April. Been hinting that there might be something under works to get something sooner. I don't have any information on that, but we will continue to fight to get those vaccines to our staff as quickly as possible. And I do want to continue to express my support and empathy for the health department, who are struggling to try and get those vaccines out to everyone who needs it with a limited supply. So while I will aggressively push to get that supply to our staff, I will understand that they are under immense pressure to get everyone vaccinated as quickly as possible. We mentioned prior in the report that we are going to be advancing some studies on the downtown transfer center. Adrian was being very delicate around the discussion about where that downtown transfer center might be with the sale of the security building on 9th Street that is adjacent to our temporary transfer plaza center. We have had ongoing discussions with the city about where we would land as the security building does undergo new construction at that site and the forced move of our operations. I am pleased to state that while there is nothing settled and firm, the city has been proactively working with GRTC, and that there is some push and some announcements that were made publicly to the paper about using the adjacent lot on 8th and Clay as the new temporary transfer center. That if that site is designed and advanced, it would include shelters for riders, operator restrooms at a minimum, those items that we need to have effective operations, and that we would continue to work together with the city to identify a permanent home for local bus transfers in the downtown area. We will make sure to keep you informed as we have more information. Again, the city is working very hard to make sure that we have consistent operations downtown for our services and for our riders and for their citizens. You may have also seen in tweets after the mayor's State of the City address that Mayor Stoney announced that the city of Richmond will be advancing a project to paint dedicated pulse BRT lanes red. This treatment is being added to the BRT dedicated lanes across the country to improve driver and pedestrian safety awareness of the protected lanes when they are driving next to or walking into bus lanes. I applaud the city's move in this direction, very excited about it. However, I have to admit, on a side note, I personally was voting that they would go with purple to be consistent with GRTC colors instead of red. However, red is the color that's being used across the country. It's being adopted as a national standard for BRT lanes. So I will have to accept that red is going to be the color of our lanes. For the GRTC annual audit for 2020, You may recall that previously our auditors reported a clean and unmodified opinion for our FY 2020 financials, with one caveat, that the audit was still pending final review of CARES Act funding. Well, the federal review standards came out in January for that funding, allowing our staff and our auditors to complete the final assessment. I am pleased to report that the auditors confirmed and finalized the previously reported clean and unmodified opinion. As there was no change, the auditors did inform us that they did not need to come back and re-present that report to the board again. Which I'm sure we all appreciate hearing on unaudited unmodified opinion, but I'm sure that we do not need to hear it again. Under the limited contracting authority provided to the board, provided by the board of the CEO for small contract modifications, this month I did sign a resolution modifying our FSA cafeteria plan authorization to allow for a rollover of FSA funds for plan participants, which is normally $500 a year to $550 a year, into the next plan period. For us, that begins on March 1st, 2021. And it will also allow in following years an increase of that rollover up to a 20% cap of the plan limits. And this is especially critical this year, as people may not have been able to use all of their FSA contribution that they originally expected as they stayed home and maintain those funds in their accounts. This will allow them to roll it over and have access to it.
What is that,
However,
Julie? What is that?
The FSA, sorry, that's the flexible savings account. So an FSA is an account that allows for employees to set aside pre-tax dollars into a flexible savings account, and that money can then be used to pay for health costs and health expenses, glasses, co-pays, in some cases over-the-counter prescriptions, things that they would normally have to pay out of their pocket, they can now pay with this pre-tax money. The rules, however, is that if they don't spend whatever they elected to set aside, if they don't spend it by the year, they lose it.
Julie?
Yes, sir.
Oh, does GRTC also offer FSA for child care expenses?
The dependent care expenses, we do, actually. And that is a higher amount of money every year that is allowed to be set aside. And we do have employees who use the dependent care savings account as well as the FSA, which is a wonderful segue, because many of our staff in this last fiscal year are on the verge of losing the pre-tax money they set aside for dependent care because of COVID. They didn't have the dependent care. They weren't able to put their child in the daycare services or the after-school program that they would usually have to pay for. And so that money is sitting in their account and they're on the verge of losing it. So HR is investigating rule changes for this year that would allow potentially for a full rollover of FSA and dependent care savings accounts into the next plan year. Mm-hmm. And to be able to use those because of the decreased use of those funds for COVID. We don't have the details of that yet. We're still looking into it. Our initial review suggests that we have the entire year to enact those changes. I hope to get them much sooner than that. And as soon as we do have those details, we will inform all staff so that they're not losing those monies that are so critical for their health and dependent care needs.
I just wanted to emphasize that piece because, you know, with healthcare expenses, it's great to roll it over, but it is, you get a new pair of glasses, you get, over the counter, you can find a way to use it. When there are no camps and there's no after school and there's no before school and there's no way to spend the money and the money just sits there and you lose it like this guy did, because the state did not allow for that. It really does bite in this instance. And I know for our employees, it would hurt, even more. So, I am just a big advocate of using FSA. But in this particular instance, you're just victimized if it's not found a way to move over.
Yeah, we are absolutely aware that I've had at least one, and I've heard of others, members of our staff, who are very much being impacted by that. And we are looking very closely at how quickly we can enact those changes and sign for them to be able to roll all of the money over because of the lack of use over the last year. And that was it, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. George, you rolled me right into my last point, so thank you for that segue. That was perfect timing. And if there are no other questions, that would conclude the CEO's report for February.
And thank you very much. I continue to be impressed and grateful for the quality of the work of the management of GRTC. Those of you who are on this phone call today, some of you not having to speak, but and I wish I could express my personal gratitude to the people who keep these buses running. I just feel like this is an operation of great significance, and because I do encounter operators and sometimes other employees regularly, and know what they put in to make this place, to make this operation work. I'm very proud to be associated with it. And actually, I like the board too. I think that this board is composed of people who really care about the health of this company, who pay attention to their homework. And I think we trust one another to be alert to any issues that need to be worked with. So thank you for that. My one statement of substance is on the 29th of January, the CVTA approved a contract with AECOM and ENO to look at the governance structure of GRTC. I have made as many requests to as many people as I can that this board be consulted to at least have some comments on the future shape of the board that manages GRTC. It seems to me that is the only appropriate thing to do. I have not yet received any assurance directly from anyone carrying out this survey that it will be done, that we will be contacted for at least some conversation. And if anyone is listening to this, including my friends at DRPT and at the TPO, I beg you to take the responsible statement, which was not made in AECOM's submission, that the members of this board will be given the opportunity to discuss this in the process of this study. You know, I know of many of you here in our staffing are working on this, but it's important. And that's it for my report. We do have an executive session. If there's nothing further, I'd like to get a motion for the executive session from Ian.
All right, I've got this from the email. I move that the board hold a closed meeting pursuant to section 2.2-3711A1 of the Code of Virginia to discuss the performance and compensation of the Chief Executive Officer.
All right, is there a second, please?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, we have to go into executive session, and Rob, you're going to have to instruct me how to get out of this thing because I don't remember.
Yes, sir, Dr. Campbell. I will send you a text to your cell phone so you can reply to me easily. When you're done with the executive session, just send me a text back and I will return to my computer and bring you all back out of it. I will also let you know when you're in, when you're secure.
All right, that's great. So I think this is the board plus Bonnie, am I right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's do it.
All right, stand by. I'm going to get us transitioned over, and everyone besides that, please leave the call.
Tanya, are you out?
And you are back live.
All right, thank you. Ian,
Yes, I have a motion. Whereas the Board of Directors of GRTC has convened in closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. And whereas Section 2.2-3712 of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by the board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law, now, therefore, be it resolved that the board hereby certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge, 1, only public matters lawfully exempt from open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting to which the certifying resolution applies, and 2, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered by the board. Witness the following vote of board members: Ben Campbell,
aye.
George Braxton,
Aye.
Gary Armstrong,
Aye.
Eldridge Coles,
Aye.
Ian Milliken, aye. Danny Smith,
All right, that's passed. Is there any further business before this meeting? I want to thank our faithful attorney for her work with the board and the executive session, and all of you for today's meeting. Julie, do you have anything you want to say?
Happy February.
Remember, yeah, all right. 30 days has September, April, June, and November. All the rest have peanut butter except February, which goes on forever. I have that. And this meeting of the Board of GRTC is adjourned.
You're waiting to say that, huh?